So my name is Daniel Boykin. I grew up in Socorro, New Mexico. I work two jobs right now. I work as a federal wildlife officer for the Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm based out of the Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge, and I also work the Sevieta National Wildlife Refuge and the San Andreas Wildlife Refuge. And then my other my weekend job, my part-time job to a certain degree, is I'm an infantry squad leader with the First of the 200th Infantry out of my company, Alpha Companies, out of Rio Rancho, New Mexico. So my responsibilities, typically a typical day as a federal wildlife officer, is I'm basically responsible for all law enforcement on a national wildlife refuge, and that's everything from monitoring hunting and fishing, monitoring people trespassing into closed areas or trespassing into closed refuges, because some of my refuges are totally closed to the public. Besides specific hunts, it's dealing with hunters and fishermen. It's educating the public on the regulations to a certain degree. It's not my primary focus, but a lot of the contacts I like to make with people are not so much punitive in nature. I'm going to give you a ticket, but more, these are the regulations on this refuge. This is how you enjoy this refuge to the best of your ability. My responsibilities as an infantry squad leader is kind of the doctrinal definition. And if any of you have any experience with the military or family, it's kind of the guiding principle that we base our jobs around in the Army. Is my doctrinal mission is I am responsible for everything my weapons squad, because I'm a weapons squad leader, does or fails to do, and that's includes all 8 soldiers under me. So typically, a weapons squad is responsible for the heavy machine guns and the anti-tank weapons in a platoon. So mostly dealing with the heavy weapon systems, providing that covering fire for the rest of the members of my platoon to accomplish the mission. Overlap in the job, number one, the higher up you get in any organization, in any job, you have to become a people person. A weapons squad leader, you have to work with all the different squad leaders, your platoon leader, your platoon sergeant, your company first sergeant, company commanders, people that are attached from outside your platoon, right? You have to work with all those people to coordinate how you're going to complete the mission, or just deal with admin tasks like getting people their evaluations done, getting people to schools, that kind of thing. Working as a federal wildlife officer, I've got to work with wildland firefighters, which is a background that I come from. I got to work with biologists, which is another background that I come from. I have a degree in wildlife biology, but you also have to work with a lot of people that you might not have enough experience with. I mean, I got to work with a lot of heavy equipment operators. I got to work with the maintenance guys, and those are the guys that they're out on the refuge more than me. So they see more than I do, because I just can't cover all that ground by myself. So having good relationships with people is incredibly important. So yeah, I mean, I grew up reading about the history of the Old West, and so I was always enamored with the scouts, the cavalry officers, the Native Americans that lived out on the land, the level of skills they had, and some of those skills were understanding the animals, understanding tracks, and they were also just knowing how to shoot, how to ride a horse, how to walk, how to navigate over rough country. My dad was a forester, and he was like, "Hey, maybe you should look at this." And so I went into range management and then eventually wildlife biology, and kind of found a fit there, because not only you are looking at individual species, you're looking at being out on the landscape and being able to recognize tracks. You're looking at even live trapping small animals to do measurements, or mist netting, which is a form of trapping small birds to take measurements. But you're also looking at the big system, at the big overarching picture of an ecosystem, and how it all comes together, and how humans affect it on the landscape. Well, some of that stuff it crosses over very well with being a soldier and being an infantryman, because you got to understand the ecosystem and the landscape you're in. And in many cases, it's not an ecosystem of animals. I mean, in Vietnam, in that era, they really had to become experts in the jungle. Not so much in my generation, but you have to understand to some degree an ecosystem of people. And when you look at a place like Afghanistan or Iraq, they're very complex states with multiple different ethnic groups that don't really get along. That's again coming back to understanding people, but you also had to be able to understand patterns in the landscape. I went to a Marine Mountain Warfare course, and it was one of the best lines ever. Was that if you want to move across country, you have to understand the patterns in that landscape. And he phrased this different, but that rolls right back into wildlife biology, and then it rolls right back into what I do now in law enforcement from a land management perspective. So I mean, all these things, and it's kind of, I mean, I feel very lucky. I'm living the best doing the best number of jobs that really fit my personality that are really relevant in this time and age. Yeah, so I had a I had a biology teacher named Mrs. Att. Mrs. Att was honestly very hard on us, and I didn't think biology was important at that point in time, and it ended up being very important in the things I wanted to do with my life. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do yet. She taught a forensics class, a criminal forensics class. It was like an add-on class that I took. It was a great class. Also had some very good history teachers, which became very important in the military and understanding, being able to not so much what I learned in those history classes, and this goes for college, especially at New Mexico Military Institute too, was having teachers who taught me and history teachers who taught me how to learn, really taught me how to research and find books that were well written and make that judgment on materials for myself so that I could read and research things outside the information that was just being given to me, which became important. And that's important continuing into this job, and that's important into life. I had great teachers. I had a couple great football coaches. I had multiple great teachers, and then I worked at a hardware store on the weekends, and I had a very good man there who really showed me how to be a hardworking man and not necessarily do jobs you like, but work hard at it. And then, of course, I was very blessed. I had my father and my mother, which who were excellent parents as well. So become become comfortable with being uncomfortable to a certain degree. And I'm kind of at this point in learning how to do law enforcement now. And I was in this point when I first joined the Army, and there's this feeling that you're learning something, and it's like you're trying to drink water out of a 3-inch fire hose, right? You just can't. You're missing half the stuff that's getting thrown at you. But the older I get, the more I crave that, right? I'm getting into jujitsu right now, and every jujitsu class is like the same thing. I feel like I'm missing half of the class. Um, but that's a good place to be because you'll look back at those times in your life when you're uncomfortable, coming back to that last point, and when you feel like you just aren't getting it and you're struggling so hard, and those will be the points that lead to your success later on in life because you'll have built those foundations. And it's easier to do when you're younger. As you get older, you're going to have family commitments. You're going to start to get old. It's horrible. I've kind of started to feel it lately. So at you all's age, you guys have that boundless energy of youth. Find something that you're passionate about. Find something that you're interested in, and go do that hard work right now because it'll pay dividends in the future. I promise you. So that's